The drum racks are basically just collections of instrument racks. That's really what they are. So you can set up drum racks. Ostensibly, drum racks are for playing drum sounds. So with drum racks, you can't spread the drum chromatically over your keyboard. And like Machine and also in Battery, you can spread the drum sound chromatically over your keyboard using their rack system. But in drum racks, you cannot do that. The drum racks are not designed to spread the sound chromatically over the keyboard. I think there is a way to do it, kind of, but it's really for our purposes for this. If you want to spread the sound chromatically over a keyboard, what I recommend you do is just use a simpler instrument, which we're going to talk about when we talk about sampling and stuff in a couple of weeks. But with the drum racks, if I just want to drag samples into the drum rack, that's really the easiest thing. That's what they're really made for. But they actually go deeper than that. So let me just show you the most basic way of using a drum rack here. I can just go over here to my drums section on the left-hand side in my browser, and I just go over here and I just drag a drum rack down. And when I've got the drum rack here, we can see it has all these little cells on it, these little pads. And these pads correspond to notes on your keyboard, to keys on your keyboard. So if I play my keyboard here, we can see these lights. Well, let me click on the right track here. There we go. We can see these lights kind of light up on there. And if I'm clicking on the drum racks that I'm actually looking at right in front of me, see how these lights light up here, right there on each cell. So what this is doing is it's actually playing that cell. And if I mouse over the cell, we can see there's actually, well, there's not a play note there yet. There will be once I put a sound in there. So all I have to do to populate this drum rack with sounds is I just grab sounds that I want to populate it with and just drag them in. It's as easy as that. There's no real hidden thing about this. It's not difficult at all. So let's say I want to put a kick drum in here. I can just go into my drum sounds that I've already got over here on the left-hand side, and you can see these drum sounds are in, they're put in by categories. So I just click on my kick drum here, and I can just click on these, and I can hear these sounds. So if I want to click on this one here, I just drag it in to the note that I want it to be on. And now when I hit that key on my keyboard, it plays it. So now I've got a kick drum. Let's go ahead and put a snare drum in here. Let's use this one here. I'm going to put this on the D pad. Right, there we go. Let's put a hi-hat in here. So I can just go through these. I'm going to put the hi-hat on my F sharp. The reason why I'm doing that is because it's a good idea to kind of set these up with the kind of general MIDI setting. So if you set these up on the same keys, like the same instrument on the same key, you can flip between different drum racks and it will keep playing the same pattern with the sounds that make sense. So if I put a kick drum on my C, and I put a snare drum on my D, and I put the hi-hat, closed hi-hat on an F sharp, for every single kit, I can then flip through different kits and audition the sounds with those similar instruments. So if you look down here on the bottom when I mouse over my sounds, hold on, let me just get that lined up there. Down here, right here, if I mouse over each one, it says a GM suggestion, which is bass drum 2, side stick, snare drum, hand claps, different things. And so if you kind of stick to these suggestions here, at least for these first octave of your keys, then it's a good little thing to kind of stick with. You don't have to stick with this, and the battery kits they come with like Machine do not stick to this, but it is useful. I find it very useful to stick to the suggestions here, so when you click on these, it'll have the right sounds. If you want to easily do this, if you click on this this little hot swap button, it'll take you to it kind of depends. Sometimes it takes you to the right sound, sometimes it doesn't really. So what I would just go in here and say, okay, this is a side stick, So I'd go in here and just say, let's get a percussion. Let's go to our percussion sounds here, because I don't think, oh, rim shot. It's called rim shots in here. And I can just go through here. And because I have my hot swap mode turned on, I can just hit enter on it and it'll put it in there. And now I can play that. Like that, you know, whatever I want to do. So let's go ahead and put a sound in here. Let's put a little rhythm in here. And I can just go ahead and play this in. And I can record on top of it. And I'm going to go ahead and just quantize that because my playing is a little bit off. Go on. Cool. There we go. Cool. Cool. So I've got this little pattern that I just made out of these drum sounds I just threw in there. And if you're thinking, wow, that looks really easy, it's because it is really easy. You don't have to like overthink this too hard in order to make it sound pretty cool. And it works pretty much exactly the same as the instrument racks worked, except instead of clicking on like a chain that looks like this, which you can click on if you want, you can actually just click on the different cells right here, these different pads, to change what you're looking at over here. And each one of these can have its own chain of effects. So for example, if I want that kick drum to be a little bit distorted, I can go over here to my audio effects and go in here to my drive and color. Let's go in here to our overdrive, and I'm just going to drag it onto the cell down here, this little pad. And now if I click on it, we can see it's in there. There we go. And I can just make this brighter. Whoops. Hey, stop that. I didn't mean to do that. On map. There we go. There we go. Okay, so now when I hit play, and I've just changed that kick drum. If I wanted to take the snare drum and change the snare drum, I just click on the snare drum. I'm looking at the snare drum cell. Let's put a filter on here. I can just drag and drop this onto the cell itself. Cool. Let's see how we can. There we go. There we go. Give it like a little weird touch on there. Cool. So I've got like one effect on my snare drum, I've got one effect on my kick drum. So you can see how this stuff works. You just drag this, the effects onto the end of the chain. And you can drag them down here or you can drag them in here. Now, a couple things are going on with this. This drum rack has all these individual sounds, but if I wanted to affect the drum rack as a whole, I can put some effects over here on the outside. So you can think of this as like a subgroup. It's almost like a subgroup here. And what I can do is I could go over here and I can put a, let's put a reverb on this, just so you can see something that makes a big difference here. I'm going here to our drums, and we'll go drums in a canyon. Drag that onto the end. Now, I could put this in a couple of different places. I can put it right here. I could put it right over here. If I put it right here, it's going to be inside of the snare drum, or in this case, the kick drum rather, inside of the kick drum chain. So if I do this, listen to how this sounds. right? It's just on the on the kick itself. And if I go over here and drag it over to the end, now it's going to be on the whole kit. Like that. See how that works? And Lycian1 says, what's your opinion about reverb compression? I mean, it's really, that's a thing about your sound that you're trying to get. If you want a compressed reverb sound, then compress that reverb sound. If you don't want it to be super compressed, then don't compress it. I put the compression inside, I put the reverb into the compression in the group for some things, and I leave it out for some things. It really depends on what kind of sound I'm trying to go for. It's not one of those things where people can tell you it's wrong unless you're making like jazz, you know, if you're recording jazz music and then you put a lot of compressed reverb on your drum kit, that's going to sound really weird for jazz. But if you're going for like an 80s type of sound, then it's going to sound very normal. So it's really about what you want to do, that whole reverb compression thing. It's really about what you're trying to do with it, because some reverb sounds and some kind of sounds you can only get if you're using a lot of compression or if you're gating it or something like that. And on an ambient techno track, sure. I mean, again, it depends on what you're trying to get out of it. Absolutely. When you're dealing with ambient or techno electronic forms, there's no real right or wrong. It's really about the vibe that you're going for. So if you're trying to get like a, you know, I might use it on like a little side stick thing to give it that kind of an interesting kind of vibe to it, because you've got to remember, when you're making ambient or techno, it's a lot of sound design, and there's really nothing to tell you, or nobody can tell you that's wrong. If that's what's in your head and that's what you want to hear, then it's right. But for genres in like, you know, more acoustic, more natural sounding genres, you wouldn't really use a lot of compressed reverb. But if you're talking about ambient techno, electronica, anything electronic, really, do it if you want. It's totally fine. Yeah. Oh, or Future Sound of London vibe. I don't think that they were running their reverbs through compression too much. I love the Orb Future Sound of London. I actually have a great playlist on my Spotify that's just called 90s Ambient. Ambient is what it's called, 90s Ambient or something like that. And it's all Orb and Future Sound of London. So... and like other stuff, but all from the 90s. And I mean, I'm sure there are sounds in there that used some compressed and gated reverbs and stuff like that. But for the most part, they were doing a lot with delays and reverbs, but I don't really think that a lot of their reverbs were sent through a lot of compression. If it was compressed, it was like a little bit compressed. But I'm not trying to tell you they never did it, but I'm not thinking of any songs off the top of my head that where I was like, oh, that's a highly compressed reverb type of thing. So again, it's really up to you. It's the type of thing where you might sample it, and we're going to talk about that stuff. We're actually going to come back and talk about sampling your reverbs and compressing them and gating them and things like that in a couple of weeks when we're talking about sampling more. So maybe, you know, follow me on here, and when you see that I'm talking about that, when you get the email about it or whatever, you can come and check it out. And it will also be like I'll put it up on YouTube as well. So, and it's a great thing to think about in here, but let's get back to the topic at hand here, which is using effects and using our drum racks. So in here, we can see I've got this, and it's like a really horrible, I don't love this reverb here, so let's go ahead and change this reverb up. When I change it, it's going to affect the whole entire sound of everything. So I go in here, hear how that changed the whole sound of everything. If I wanted to put that just directly on the snare drum, I click on my snare drum over here, and I can just drag this into my clip. And there we've got this kind of gated reverb directly on the snare drum, just on the snare drum here. And it's not on anything else. If I want it to be on everything else, I can drag it outside of my drum rack. And you can hear that's actually kind of a cool little sound there. I can actually make it a little bit shorter. There we go. Cool. Yeah. Bring more in, bring less in. You know, I would dial this in like this. If I wanted to have this like this, I'd bring it in and dial it down like that. And you can hear it's on everything, or I can just put it on my snare drum. I could also just put it on my hi-hat if I wanted to. And all I do to do this is I just click and drag it over to my hi-hat pad, drop it down, and now it puts it onto my hi-hat. And you can hear that reverb is just on the hi-hat. Cool. I can dial it in however much I want. Okay, so if I wanted to compress the drums as a whole, like you would do like a kind of a parallel compression, what I can do is I can go over here and grab my dynamics. I like to use the glue compressor for stuff, and I'm just going to drag it onto the drum rack track right here, and it's going to automatically put it after my drum rack instrument. So I can go in here, and let's go ahead and dial this in. I'm going to go ahead and make it super compressed. Hear how it's like super compressed there? Put that ratio up. Right? We're getting a lot of pop on the beginning. I'm going to go ahead and dial this down. Dial my makeup gain down a little bit. Right? So we can get that pop on the beginning. Get that low end in there. Turn on the soft clip here so it's not clipping super hard. So with this kind of setting here, maybe I want this setting for my whole entire drum rack that I just made. Well, what can I do about this? Because it's not inside of the drum rack itself. It's not inside, it's affecting everything. Well, here's what I can do. I can use what we learned earlier about the instrument racks. Remember what I said, we can have racks inside of racks inside of racks. And so what I can do here is I can take this drum rack and I can highlight the glue compressor as well. I can select this by holding down Shift and clicking it. And now I can put everything together by hitting Command G. And what this does is it gives us a rack on top of the drum rack. So the drum rack is inside of this instrument rack, but the glue compressor is now compressing the drum rack as a whole. So here's my drum rack, and it's hard to see this, how this works, but the drum rack is this one right here. If I select it, it's this contained box, and my individual sounds are inside the contained box. So I've got this here, and you can see there's still like a little thing after it. This definitely does take you time to get used to looking at this. How does it look? But once you get used to it, it's pretty easy to see how this is set up. So we can see here, I've got my individual drum sounds, and they've got their effects on them. I've got the overdrive on my kick drum. I've got the filter on my snare drum, and the hi-hat. I've got this gated sound here, and I want to compress them overall. So the drum rack is this one here. If I want to not see that anymore, I can just click on this little thing here. So I'm not looking at all the individual instruments, and I can see the glue compressor is actually outside of the drum rack. It's a little bit hard to see, but you can see it right there. And then you can see the space over here at the end. This is for me to put more effects in here because this is its own rack. So I've got this drum rack in here. Cool. And let's go ahead and make some changes on this envelope filter here. Let's take that release. Yeah, cool. It's like a weird snare drum sound that I'm going for in here. Now, what's cool about this is I can actually have multiple drum racks inside of this instrument rack. And this starts to bring up some really cool features, especially for using this live. Okay, so I'm going to show you this real quick, and then we're going to go back and talk about the drum racks here. But this is really, I'm just showing you what I did earlier with the instrument racks. I'm just using it with a drum rack. So the drum rack is a collection of racks that are on different keys. And the instrument rack is a collection of racks that are spread across all the keys. So what I can do here is I'm going to make another drum rack. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to pull the drum rack. I'm going to drop it down into my instrument rack that I've got. I'm going to just drag it and drop it down in here. So I've got drum rack 1. I'm going to call this one Deep Kit. And this one, I'm going to rename it, Command R to rename it. I'm going to call this one Light Dist Kit. And for this one, I'm going to put some different sounds in here. I'm going to go back and find, let's find a kick drum that I like. Okay, here we'll use this one right here, and I'm gonna drag that onto the key that I want, which is gonna be the same keys that I was using before. So this is why it's good to have everything on the same keys on your keyboard, because of what we're about to do right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the kick on there, and let's put a hi-hat in here. Let's use this one. And I've just done this so many times. I know where these sounds go. When you're first starting off doing this stuff, it might be a little bit harder. It might take a little bit more time to do this. I'm gonna put a hand clap on here. Let's use this 80s hand, the 808 hand clap, and then let's get another rim shot or side stick. Yeah, this one right here is good. And now what I'm gonna do is on this kit right here, I'm going to go ahead and drag in a like a filter here and a distortion. So I'm going to put the distortion first. Let's go ahead and go to our audio effects. Let's grab a drive and color. Let's grab an amp. I'm going to put it inside of here. And this is where things get a little bit tricky. If I put it right here, let me hold on a second. Let's zoom in. So if I put it, wait, can I do that? Yeah. Let me just do this. There we go. If I put it right here, it's going to put it outside of my drum rack. If I put it right here, it's going to put it onto the individual pad that I have selected. I want to put it right here, so it puts it into that group, but it's still within my instrument rack. So out here is outside of the instrument rack. Out here is on that one specific drum rack, but not the other drum rack that I have. And right here is on the individual cell. I know this is kind of confusing, but once you experiment with this and try it out, it can really help out with stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and mute my original one. So now I have this like crazy distorted sound. And then I'm gonna go ahead and suck out the low end out of it using a filter right here. We got that there. And I'm going to go ahead and take my hi-hat here, shorten it down a little bit. And I'm going to put a little filter on this. So we can hear how that really sounds pretty different from the other one. And if I go over here, I want to hear the other one. There it is there. And I can have this drum kit right here. And you can see how this is so cool for live performances, because I can grab a knob and flip between these two drum kits really easily by using, let's go back over here to my light dist kit. I'm going to use my chains here. I have to go to I/O settings here. And wait, oh wait, no, that's wrong, sorry. I need to go into this one here. This is the one where I want to use my chains. So in here in my instrument rack, I'm going to use the chains to go ahead and flip between these two different racks. So I'm going to close this rack down so we don't see it. So I've got the drums, the distortion and the filter on this one here, and I've got the glue compressor on this one here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip between them using my chain. And I'm just going to move this over here, so it's just on the next one right there. And I'm going to right click and add this to a knob on my instrument map rack, macro 1. And I'm going to limit this to 1 and 2. I click on map, max is going to be 1, and this one's going to be 0. And now when I turn my knob back and forth, it's going to actually flip between these two kits. So I click on this one, I hit play. There we go. And now when I want to hear the other kit, I just flip the knob. Well, I have to deselect stuff. There we go. Flip the knob. And I can just go back and forth between these kits. Which is super, super cool for when you're performing live. I don't use this in the studio so much, but I have used it on stage. Super dope. Okay, so again, it's not so complex actually. It's just a lot of little understanding of certain parts. The main thing is just to understand that you've got racks inside of racks inside of racks, and you just have to, the hardest part about this is not really understanding the concept. It's really about being able to recognize where things are located. And you might just make a mistake and drag something into the wrong place. Just move it over to the other place. Here's a way of moving stuff around. For example, if I wanted to put this filter, if I want to take the filter out of my snare drum here and move it to maybe the snare drum of my other rack over here, here's how you do that. You click and you hold down the mouse button and you mouse over the rack you want to drag it into, and this little box opens up. See here, see this little box is like opening up. It opens up the little box and that switches to that instrument. I'm still holding my mouse button down, and I go over here to my clap and I drag this and a little box opens. Or I don't have to open up a little box, I just drag and drop it onto the clap, and now this clap has the filter on it. So you can see how that works. If I want to put it back onto the other one, see now it's missing it from this one. If I want to put it back on this one, I can just grab it, drag it over, just keep my mouse held down on it, and it'll put it right there, and I just put it onto the right pad where I want it to go. Cool. There you go. And that's how that works there. It's gonna take some getting used to. I've been doing this for years and years and years. I make it look very easy. I make it look way easier than it was at first for me. But once you've done it a few times, it doesn't take that long to get used to it. So once you've done it a few times, you can definitely, just use that. Just anytime you want to open up like say I'm on this instrument here and I want to put something on this MIDI one over here. Let's say I want to put the filter on here. I just click and mouse over, and if I leave it there, it'll put it right there. Oh, it actually just moves it immediately now. That's like a new thing for Live 11. And I can drag it onto something. If I want to drag it over here, I just go up to the top, and now it switches over to that one, and I can just move this effect around, or I can just drag it on there. See how that works? See how it opens up? Yeah, there you go. It opens up that little thing. If I put it up on the top, it just kind of automatically switches to it. But it opens up and it shows me that one, and if I just drop it, it's going to put it at the end of whatever's there. And then I can just drag it in here. But if I wanted to put it here, I just let it open, and I can put it wherever I want. There's nothing on here, so it's just going to go right on the end there. So this is how you can move your effects around to different places and see what's on that lane. You just grab it and mouse and just like keep holding the mouse down, and it will eventually open up that area. So it makes it really easy to move stuff around. You just have to have a little bit of patience. Just don't let go of that mouse button. And this is one reason why I started using a trackball mouse. Let me show you can I show you? No, I can't. Well, that's why I started using this trackball mouse here like this, because this trackball mouse, I use the thumb button for my clicker, and so it easily allows me just to keep my hand down on the button and click things like that. So there we go. Pardon me, somebody's at the door. I'm not expecting anybody, but hold on, let me just see what's going on there. Hold on, I'll be right back. Hold on one second. FedEx. All right. I hope it's my sunglasses. All right, so cool. So hopefully that helps you understand some stuff with these instrument racks and drum racks and stuff like that, and how they all kind of work together. Now, the last thing I want to talk about with my drum racks is something I did mention earlier when we talked about the drum racks. The drum racks can be an effect in an instrument chain, a chain of instrument effects. If you drag a drum sound onto a rack, a pad here, I'm going to go ahead and, yeah, he's got this one here. So I've got this one here. If I drag a drum sound onto this, so let me drag another sound onto one of these keys here. We'll drag a tom onto this key. I'm going to go here to my drums. I'm going to grab my toms. All right, so these ones are pretty cool. I drag this one on here. I'm going to put it on G right here. So if I hit G, put this one on B, or A rather. Wait, not that one. This one. Right, so I've got these two different sounds. You can see that it automatically makes a simpler instrument right here. We're going to talk about the simpler instruments on another day. But this is like a real easy thing we can do here. Just put these simpler, it just automatically creates that simpler instrument. But I don't have to stick to samples. I can actually use instruments in my drum rack. And let me just show you how this works. This is super cool. I can just go ahead and let's say I've got my toms on G and A, and let's put a different tom on B, but let's use an instrument to make this tom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to my third-party instruments. Let's go over to Max for Live, not Max for Live, let's go to my plugins, and let's use Massive, the original Massive. I think it works. And all I do is just take my instrument and I just drag it onto whatever pad I want it to be on, in this case B. And now, when I hit it, I can actually see Massive is right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Massive, go to my browser here, which might take a second to pull it up because I have all of these different presets in here from different machine expansion packs. And I haven't loaded this up yet, so it's got to think about it for a second. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to my type, and let's call this percussion. So all these different percussion sounds. There we go. Yeah, Massive's dope. Have you played with Massive X? Massive X is really, really cool. All right, so here I've got all these sounds in here. It's not playing, like, these ones that are grayed out are ones I can't really play, but this is okay. I'm going to use this cowbell sound here. And now I can do anything to it that I want to use. I can do anything to it that I can do in Massive. So I go into my synth over here. And if I want to make I want to make it longer with my envelope. Let's go ahead and make this release. There we go. There we go. Can make it longer. Let's get this filter. The filter is number 1 here. So we'll go over here to number 1. Oh, here it's number. It's here we got a number 3 over here. There we go. So now I can go ahead and program this sound in here however I want. So I'm going to go ahead and, whoops, not that. There we go. Program this in. Okay, there we go, like that. Now, cool. Now I can go through and I can actually adjust the sound in real time because it's actually adjusting the synth itself. So, for example, it's super cool. Well, especially if you're trying to make, listen, if, I don't know how you say your name, I'm sorry. If you're trying to make orb stuff and like Future Sound of London type of things, this is like what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to make a drum rack with instruments like massive, and then you're going to want to map these to your macros over here, so you can really just mess with these and change it in real time. And you can do this all the way up here on this opening thing. So for example, all I have to do is just go in here and configure my massive here. I just click on this configure button and I click on these macros that are in here, and it will put it into my Ableton Live section here. And then I can right click on these and I can add these all to these over here. So down here, I can just right click and add these. You have to add them up. So I can add them to macro 1, macro 2, macro 3, macro 4. I'm adding them up, and what they're doing is they're going into this rack that they are in right now, which is actually the overall drum rack. So I can do this, and now I can just grab this sound here and I can actually twist it. And I can mess with it as it plays with my knobs. And you can mess around with that, which is really, really cool. So, I mean, really, the sky's the limit with this stuff. The only thing you're going to run into with this is that if you are using synthesizers to make your sounds, it's going to hit your CPU harder than if you're using samples to make your sounds. If all you're using is samples to make your sounds, then you're going to be fine. It's pretty easy. But if you are using a lot of synthesizers to make your sounds, then it's going to create some CPU issues depending on your computer. Now, what's really cool about this, and what I often do is if I want to use a sound like this and I want to use it a couple things in a drum rack, or just even one thing in a drum rack, I'll usually just put the sound into a drum rack by itself and not with all the other instruments, because I use my drum racks a little bit, I use my instruments kind of all separately. So I don't really do this except for on stage for live stuff. I use all my instruments, my instruments like separately. I'll go through and find percussion sounds and then group it together in its own little instrument rack, or if I need to put it on a pad sound for whatever reason with a couple of different ones. So as you kind of work, you'll get more into different styles of working, different ways of working. So for example, nowadays with this massive, I wouldn't put it into a drum rack like this necessarily. I would just put it into an instrument group by itself. I wouldn't have anything else in there. I would just group it by itself, and I would set up these these presets here, these macros, into a new variation, and I'd call that a variation, and I'd give this, that, like this, and just dial some sounds in. Yeah, that's pretty cool. There's a lot of really cool things you can do with this. And I could just say these variations, and I would go through and then rename them. So here's one variation. Which is pretty neat. I think that's a really cool feature, and that's what I really enjoy doing here. Now, if I want to save this drum kit, remember I can go back and forth with my chain selector. So I hit that, and then I go over here. Maybe on this chain here, I have a tom drum that's in there. I just have to click down here to get back to where I am. So I had a sound on B1. It was playing B1. And maybe I don't want to have another massive in here. So I can go over here to my drums, click on the tom. Use this one right here, put that in there. I'm going to dial it in. So it's like basically the same pitch as the other one. There we go. Now I can go back and forth. And I can just go back and forth between these. And again, you can see how cool this would be on a stage. You can flip back and forth between your different instruments there. So that's really cool. What I can do is I can save this. I'll save this one as Live Elect Kit. I don't know. Dist. Whatever. And click the little button here, and it saves that right there in my instrument rack section over there. Pretty darn cool, huh? So I actually probably don't want to save it with everything opened up like that, so I would go ahead and resave it with everything closed down. Yes, I want to overwrite it. And there you go with that. That's a really cool way we can use that. Now, there was something. Hold on, let's go look at the notes over here. Instrument rack. So with the drum racks, we've got one chain, and each chain can have an instrument and effects. For one drum rack, you can have 128 different chains in here. Each one of these little things here, these little boxes, each one of those can be its own instrument and effects, its own sample and effects and stuff like that. So you can have 128 of these. I don't really recommend doing 128 of these, but you can certainly do that and have a lot of stuff in there. There is a way that I use my drum racks that I'm going to show you here in just a second when I'm dealing with samples and things. You can have one instrument and lots of effects. Third-party instruments and effects are okay. And this right here takes you through using a synth and a drum rack. So first of all, you drag the plugin onto a pad, show the rack's chain list, open the drum rack input-output section, and set your receive notes up correctly. The receive note is the input from your controller. I didn't have to set that up. The play note, if your instrument has pitches, you want to set that play note up. We didn't really talk about that this time, but here, let me show you what I mean by that. Go over here to this one. So here's my massive. If I click on this little chain list thing and we show the I/O section right here, it's all this stuff right here. Make sure these are illuminated. See how these are open here? I'm going to close that down. So this I/O section, the I/O section, what it means is right here is this one. Let me solo this out. Hold on. There we go. So if I solo that out, I can change the play note here it's not going to change my note because this sound is not affected by the pitch. But if I open up my massive and I change to a different sound that's not a drum sound, percussion sounds in general are they're not pitch oriented so much. Some are, some are not. But let's go in here and go to our percussion sounds. Everything should have opened up already. Good. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna, let's see, does this one change? Yeah. So I can change the key of my sound by selecting my play note here and changing that. So if my key is in the key of A, I can just change that up right there. And if it maps correctly with my the sound I'm using to the pitch, then it will change the pitch correctly. But not all percussion sounds do that, so just be aware of that. You don't have to use percussion sounds, of course. I just find that it's easier to use percussion or drums for stuff, especially if you're dealing with like a synth like massive. Here it's easier to just kind of go with whatever they have. There's not going to be a lot of percussion sounds or drum sounds. There's a few more drum sounds than there were percussion sounds. Another thing you could have is like plucked sounds, might be good for that kind of stuff. There's going to be a lot more of those. And then what I mean, maybe sound effects. I don't really know. I mean, there's a lot more sound effects. I just mostly use like the drum sounds, or I just make my own sounds in here, which we will talk about once we're talking about synthesizers. I think that's next week. Cool. What else to talk about drum racks? I feel like there are more things to talk about with drum racks. Let's just go through our notes here and just see what's going on. Okay, so there's something that I think is kind of a newish feature I wanted to talk about. I can't remember what it is right now. I got sidetracked earlier, so it's hard for me to remember what it is. But I do want to show you something here. You may have noticed over here on my left-hand side, I have... Oh, interesting. It's not letting me zoom in and out anymore. Oh, there we go. I was hitting the wrong button. So I've got this thing over here called Ableton Plugins, and this is something you may have seen when I clicked on it earlier. This is my own personal stash of presets that I've made over the years. I actually keep this in my Dropbox folder so that I can get to it at any time, at any location. We did talk about this a little bit the other day. I'm going to show you how to make this right now because it does tie in to all these racks and stuff that we're making. I recommend that you save your different presets and sounds that you make inside of a folder called Ableton Plugins. And if you have some kind of a cloud service like iCloud from Apple or Google Drive from Google or Dropbox, then you connect up your Ableton Plugins folder with that. I did have a computer crash on me once before, and I always back up all my stuff, so the computer crashing wasn't that big of a deal, but my Ableton Plugins folder was sitting in like a default location in my documents, and I couldn't get to it again. So all the plugin preset settings that I'd made over the years before that had just gotten lost. And I'd been making them for a long time, and it was really unfortunate that I didn't think ahead to put this into another folder. So it wasn't all the way back to the beginning because I had backed up the whole entire drive, so it wasn't all the way back, but I did lose a few of the ones I had been working on recently. But now what I do is I have it so it's in the cloud. So every time I add something to this plugins folder, it goes ahead and updates it in my Dropbox. So yeah, let me just turn on my Dropbox here. So what I can do is here's how you do this. I'm going to go into my... Oh, I see what's going on. My thing is running out of juice. Here, hold on one second. Let me just... I gotta plug my keyboard in real quick. And it's USB-C, so I'm gonna have to use my Apple power adapter here. Just give me a second. Cool. All right. Everything's all tangled up here. I have a separate power adapter for my computer that I use, so I don't really use this cable that much when I'm in my studio here. I do use it if I move around, but so that's why I had this thing in somewhere else. Let me just plug this in. All right, now we are cooking with fire, I think. Or not? Oh. There we go. Cool. All right, so, all right, good. Now we've got the power adapter in there. Okay, so here's what you do. I'm going to go into my Finder, make a new Finder window. Go into my Finder here, and in here I'm going to choose a location to put my Ableton Live favorites. And you can name the folder anything you want. It doesn't matter what you name it. But I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to put one in my documents for right now. And I'm going to go ahead and make a folder called Ableton. Here, let's, wait, hold on. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. I already made one before. I'm going to go ahead and delete it. I'm going to remove it out of, do I have it in here? Oh yeah. Rename, remove from sidebar. There we go. Okay. So I made this folder, make a new folder, Command Shift N, Ableton, favorites, faves, whatever you want to call it. And what I'm going to do is after I make that folder, I'm going to go back to Ableton Live and I'm going to go to my places down here. I'm going to go to Add Folder and I'm going to click on Ableton Faves. I'm going to click Open. And now that Ableton Faves folder is going to show up down here. I can just drag it and move it up to the top right up here, wherever I want to put it. It'll go, I can put it right beneath my current project, which you can see is where my Ableton plugins goes. And now once I'm in here, anything that I make, I can drag it into this folder here. So for example, this user library, I just made this live electric kit dist. I can drag this and I mouse over it until it opens up and I can just put it in here. Now, it's going to be inside of this folder here. I can right click, I can make a new folder, I can call this new folder drum kits, and I can put it inside my drum kits folder. And in this way, I can organize all my Ableton Live presets. This is a really, really cool feature that people don't really use enough. And I'll tell you why you should use it in addition to your collections here. The collections are a new way that Ableton Live allows you to save like presets and stuff like that. But I actually recommend that you use this Ableton favorites folder or plugins folder, whatever you want to name it, in your cloud-based, link to your cloud, because these collections do not let you actually save. They don't let you back it up because this is just like part of a script or something as far as I can tell. If I'm wrong, somebody please tell me, but I haven't seen a way to back these up. So what I do is I actually have my Ableton plugins folder here that's on my Dropbox, and I just link stuff from here into my different collections over here, which is easier to get to. So if you go in here, you see that here's my instruments, and I got some instrument stuff, and I have another folder in here that's called instruments, which is actually linking to this Ableton plugins folder. And in here, I have all these same things. And some of these I actually have, like you can see, I've got Gamelan up here. See these little red dots? These little red dots actually go to this instruments folder. So some of these are just in here, just right here. And other ones I actually have to go into my instruments folder here. And I have different stuff in here. You can have all sorts of things in here. So for example, why are you not? Weird. Okay, for some reason it is not charging correctly. Why are you not charging correctly? That is super annoying. All right, well, whatever. We'll see what happens. So you can see if I go ahead and I make a new track, which I can't do because, there we go. I'm gonna have to use my other keyboard over here. That's so weird. If I make this new track here, and I can go in here and you can see I've set up a bunch of my different libraries here. So for example, I've got this Albion library and I've went through and I've created all these different presets in here. And these are just up here in my instruments, but I could also get to it from this. If I click on here and get it in here, you can see here's my Spitfire sounds. So it's in a couple different places in here, but it just makes it easier to get to. So I can go in here and I can go over here, my percussion sounds. and it loads up. It takes a second to load it up. There we go. Yeah, so I've got these different percussion sounds. If I want to get rid of it, I want to swap it out with something, I can just click on my hot swap button and I go down here to my strings, mid, soft, wild, and it loads these up in here. Give it a second for it to actually load up, and so now I can go in here. Here's my string sounds. And I can go in here and it's automatically adjust to like different parts. And I can adjust my different microphones. You know, so I can adjust this and use the instrument how it's meant to be used. Now the cool thing is with this is because I have it set up like this, under the Spitfire they've made some instruments using Contact, and now they make instruments using their own proprietary thing. So if I go in here and I say, okay, I don't want to use I don't have to worry about pulling up Contact or something like that. I can just go in here and say I want my brass sounds. So I can go in here, I can grab my horn solo, double click that. It's going to take a second because it has to open up that plugin, which is the BBC player. But if I organize things like this, now I can go through and I can just play it. And I can play this really easily. And I can make adjustments here. You know, which is a really nice way to use this. And it's nice to have things organized by my different plugin types. Now, I have this set up here under instruments, and I have it set up under like kind of broad strokes. So I have my collection set up like broad strokes, instruments, drums, groups, EQs, compression, stuff like that. But then inside of my instruments, for example, I have them set up by different particular plugin manufacturers. And I also do that with not only with the instruments, but also with my, if you go here, look at my Ableton plugins folder, I've got all sorts of stuff in here. I've got instruments, I've got filters, I've got FabFilter stuff specifically, I've got drums, I've got mastering and effects. I've got a whole bunch of things set up like this. So I really recommend that you go through and take the time to do this stuff. It does take a while. It's not something that you want to do when you're in the middle of being super creative. It's something that you want to do when you're really not feeling super creative and you just want to work on some stuff and still keep moving forward, but not, you know, you're not really feeling inspired to make anything new. So you just go through and find some sounds. And probably what's going to happen is as you're digging through sounds and you're putting them in your favorites folder, you're going to get inspired. So it's pretty cool the way that works. All right. I think that that's pretty much coming to the end of stuff. Let's go in here to our preview and just see. Yep, cool. So this is how to make a favorites folder. Favorites folders are great for organizing your favorite plugins or sounds that you've made. Make a folder on your computer, call it Live Faves or whatever you want to call it. In Live, go to the places in your browser, add folder, navigate to the folder you just created. Any rack can be dragged into your favorites folder. You just have to like be patient and let it open up inside of that. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this video recording here.